All right, so we've gone through factoring the greatest common factor, special factors, AC method of factoring, factor by grouping. So more often than not, it's not just one of those scenarios you have to use. You're going to have to use multiples on one problem to get it completely factored. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of something you have to completely factor. So it's going to have a combination of a couple of different things. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I know I have 4 terms. But the first thing I always look for, always, is factor the greatest common factor out first. That's always the very first thing I do. Always factor the greatest common factor out. So I'm going to look. I have x to the 4th, 5x cubed, x squared, and 5x. I have a greatest common factor of x. So I always factor the GCF first, and we're going to factor that out. So we have x times, now divide all these by x. I have x cubed minus 5x squared minus x plus 5. All right, so there's my GCF part. Now, I still have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms left. That's a candidate for factoring by grouping. So what we're going to do is we're going to look to see if we can group. But hey, I got this pesky minus here, so I got to remember I have to add negative numbers. So I don't forget about this x. I still have to write it. So now I'm going to have x, and I'm going to put a square bracket here. It means the same thing as parentheses. I just don't like having parenthesis and parenthesis. And I'm going to group my first two. I have x cubed minus 5x squared. I'm going to put my plus sign in between my groups, and I have a negative x plus 5. All right, so I've grouped them. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this and say, what's the GCF? Well, the GCF is x squared. Here, what's the GCF? Well, nothing really jumps out at you, but because this is a negative, I want to take the negative 1 out. Because you can always take a negative 1 out. So don't forget this x. I have x. I'm still going to use my square bracket. My greatest common factor here is x squared. That leaves me with x minus 5. I'm going to take a negative 1 out. This leaves me with a x minus 5 when I divide it out. Hey, look, I have another greatest common factor, so factor by grouping does work on this. So don't forget your x. So here's my GCF that I factor out, my x minus 5 GCF, and that leaves me x squared minus 1. Hey, this is the difference of two squares. So this can still factor. So I don't forget my x or my x minus 5, but this factors to a, your x plus 1, and your x minus 1. And now you are completely factored. So in this one, we had to do a greatest common factor, grouping, factor by grouping, then take another greatest common factor out, take another greatest common factor out, and then we had to do the difference of two squares. So we do all of this to get this completely factored to this factored form right here. And there are so many different options you can do this, so you have to be on the lookout for every way that you can factor, because you can have a GCF in the AC method, and then once you do the AC method, you can end up with a different special factor. You can do all types of different things here, so you have to really be on the lookout, and you have to factor all of them. You have to think special factors, AC method, factor by grouping, greatest common factor. The one hard, fast rule is always take your greatest common factor out first. Always, always, always. Hi, I'm Mr. Buzzard, and these videos are supplemental instruction for my students. If you found the video enjoyable, make sure you click the like button and click subscribe, as well as the bell for notifications to receive future videos on high school mathematics.